There are inulin-based sweeteners that are fiber-based, and you can get a sweetener from sweet potato fiber. But the other one, which seems to be good for most people, is monk fruit, because it's actually a fruit. It's also known as Lohango, which is the Chinese name. And that's zero glycemic, not that sweet, but it's got a nice flavor. And so that's another alternative too.
Welcome to the Healthy Skin Show with Jennifer Fugo, where we're flipping everything you've been told about your chronic skin issues upside down and connecting you with alternative solutions your dermatologist never told you about.
Welcome back to episode number 82 of the Healthy Skin Show. In today's show, we're going to be talking about how you can begin to pare back your sugar intake to help your skin, no matter what type of skin condition that you have. Many of you know that sugar is a trigger, and it's not to say that you have to go sugar-free, but oftentimes we don't realize that there can be excess sugar in some of the most common things that we consume that could be sabotaging your skin. Before we dive into today's interview with my guest, I wanted to share some praise for the show as well as a listener's question. Joel Bree shared, "What I love most about the show is the quick sessions that are jam-packed with incredibly helpful information. As someone who has struggled with skin issues, I'm so grateful to see this type of information being shared and to listen to somebody with so much passion on the topic. Thank you for this podcast. I know it isn't easy to put something like this together and create all of these episodes every single week. I truly appreciate your efforts and dedication to those of us struggling with skin health problems." You know something? That is why I created the Healthy Skin Show, to make sure that you guys were getting the best content humanly possible in a short period of time that makes it digestible for you. If you've loved the Healthy Skin Show and you found the episodes helpful, and maybe you even binge on them every single week, as I hear from some of our listeners, please head on over to your podcast platform of choice, rate and review the podcast. I would love for you to share what you've learned with other people. And now let's hear from a listener.
My name is Liz, and I listen to your podcast weekly. Thank you. I've learned a lot. I am an autoimmune patient. I have Sjogren's syndrome, and I also have CRPS, as well as peripheral neuropathy. So I deal with a lot of health issues, and I've cut back significantly on my medications, but I am having a problem with my skin. I am currently on a paleo diet for the most part. I keep getting scalp acne, and I listened to your whole podcast with the guy who was talking about seborrheic dermatitis, and, I've implemented a lot of the things that they say there. I take high quality supplements. I work with a functional medicine specialist, but I'm still getting my breakouts in my eyebrows, my scalp, and I don't know what else I can do.
First of all, Liz, I want to take a moment to commend you for all of your effort and for leaving a question here for the Healthy Skin Show. It takes a lot of energy to do what you are doing, and it is very obvious to me that you are committed to your best health, which is why you've taken action, you're working with a functional doctor, and you've done a lot of things to improve your situation. Here's the thing. You mentioned that you're eating a paleo diet, and as you probably recall me saying a number of times, we aren't what we eat. We are what we absorb. So first of all, there's always the possibility that you're not absorbing all of the nutrients from your food, and I would encourage you to make sure that the nutrients that you are taking, both from food and from your supplements, is being absorbed. Second of all, I would highly recommend that you ask your functional doctor to investigate underlying and hidden infections. I discussed this issue in depth with Dr. Jess Petros in a previous episode, and I would also consider getting checked for folliculitis. Sometimes acne of the scalp can actually be folliculitis, which are inflamed hair follicles, usually triggered by bacteria or fungal organisms. If your functional doctor does not have much experience diagnosing skin issues, it may be worthwhile to go back to a dermatologist and have them take a look at it so that you accurately know whether you're dealing with acne or it's actually folliculitis. A previous client with whom I consulted also worked with a functional doctor and had previously worked on her gut and infections that she had. However, upon review of her current symptoms and flares, I was able to ascertain that retesting for infections was an important next step that the doctor just did not have the bandwidth to identify because they were dealing with so many issues as a result of her complex case. When the doctor retested this client, he did discover that she not only had bacterial infections, but she also had fungal infections as well that were underlying the issues. Initially, the client was a bit frustrated because she felt that she had already dealt with these problems. However, healing is not a straight line, and things can come back. We can also get exposed to things that we didn't necessarily want to pick up. But when push came to shove, my client was very happy that she at least had answers that she could finally take action on so that her skin would stop being hijacked. My point in sharing all of this is that we can't always assume what we've done before may not have to be revisited. And in those particular cases where we do find infections or dysbiosis, be it on the skin and within the gut, it's worthwhile to repeat that diet and supplements may not be enough. Antimicrobial and antifungal botanical supplements may be a critical piece to your puzzle, but at times, if there is a severe enough infection, antibiotics and antifungal medications may be warranted. And even if we assume that there's only a topical problem, such as topical dysbiosis of the skin microbiome, you still should consider doing something internally because we have that connection between the gut microbiome and that of the skin. I hope that this is helpful for you to hear, and if you have a burning question that you would love for me to answer on the show, head on over to healthyskinshow.com, scroll down a tad, you'll see a blue box with a microphone in it where you can record your own message that will be included in an upcoming episode. All right, I think it's time for us to jump into today's interview with my guest, talking all about sugar. Ricki, thank you so much for coming back and talking to us about this.
Oh, I love it. Thank you for having me.
Well, so now here's the thing. The last time we talked all about like your experience, and you kept mentioning, oh, I've done this like anti-candida diet whole thing. And you and I both know Candida loves sugar, and it isn't even necessarily about Candida. A lot of times when I have gut infection clients, they really need to reduce their sugar intake, and they don't know how. They love to bake, and they're just really used to things tasting sweet. So you have really mastered this. I am not a good baker. I admit it. So I am not the person to talk on and that's why I want you here today. So can you share with us a little bit about how the sugar-free landscape has changed? Because a lot of people might be thinking, well, I'll just go and buy Splenda.
Don't do that.
Don't do it, guys.
So first, I think I should just make the distinction between alternative and natural sweeteners, because alternative basically means anything that isn't sugar. So Splenda would fall into that, or like the saccharin or sucralose, all those things. Aspartame was the other one I was thinking of. So that's just alternative, but those are not natural sweeteners in the sense that they have to be created in a lab, and they're chemically altered, and they're not healthy, as you and I well know. Whereas you can have a whole category of natural sweeteners, which just means, my sort of most basic definition is, if I had the right equipment, could I make this at home? Right. So, like maple syrup, if I knew how to tap trees, I could gather maple syrup.
We could totally do that. You could totally do that. You're in Canada.
We could, yeah. Or like honey, or other natural sweetener would be brown rice syrup. So things that haven't been grossly modified from their original form. So even something like sucanat, which looks like brown sugar, and the name sucanat is an acronym for sugar cane natural, right? So what they do is they just extract the juice from the sugarcane plant and dehydrate it, and there's your sucanat. So that's a whole category of natural. But at the same time, even within that natural category, it might be something that isn't unhealthy for a healthy person. But for someone like me, who's really sensitive to sugars, I have to think about other factors like the glycemic index. How quickly does it raise your blood sugar? So I had to even eliminate a whole bunch of natural sweeteners. So I guess it depends on where the person is in their journey. When I first started and I just didn't want to have refined white sugar, I did use maple syrup. I did use coconut sugar and coconut palm sugar. I did use brown rice syrup. Blackstrap molasses is incredibly healthy. It's got so many minerals in it and vitamins, but for me, it's too high on the glycemic index because it's like 98, which is very close to white sugar. So I had to look for natural sweeteners that were also low glycemic. And when I first started, the only natural sweetener around was stevia or stevia, depending how you pronounce it. So because that comes from an herb, it's 100 times sweeter than sugar. But I don't know if you're a fan of stevia or not.
I am. I use stevia. I know some people aren't. And I've also had an increase in clients who do not tolerate stevia, surprisingly. And there's some people that they feel that it has an aftertaste. But I have personally found that the liquid versions of stevia tend to be less aftertasty. And I don't mind it. I really don't. And I do use it. I don't eat a ton of sweet stuff, guys. So again, I think what Ricki is encouraging you to do, which is what her and I both do, which is, you have to find the sweeteners that work for you, but you shouldn't just hang on to one thing. The idea is to figure out what grouping of alternative and low glycemic sweeteners can you do that are more natural. That way too, you don't end up developing a sensitivity to them, which can happen. Some people do find that they don't tolerate certain things after a while. But so tell us a little bit about stevia for those people that they're like, wait, it's a plant? Yes. And guys, you can actually buy it at Lowe's or Home Depot. If you're in the US, you can actually go and buy a stevia plant at your local home gardening center. And then you're wondering, okay, how do I use this? So let's talk a little bit about that.
Sure. So that's how it was originally used, is people would dry the leaves and pulverize them and use them like tea leaves almost. And then it would be infused in your water. It would be sweet. And they realized it was so sweet. So if you want to go totally natural with stevia, there are different brands. The one that I know of here, I don't know if I should even mention the brand or not, but it's a dehydrated leaves that are pulverized to a green powder. So it's literally just the leaves that have been dried and powdered. That one is going to have the strongest sort of earthy flavor because it's actually the whole leaves. But then you can get, like you said, the liquid stevia or the powder. Is just be sure that it's pure stevia extract in there and that they haven't added any fillers. So because stevia is so concentrated in its sweetness, if you find any brand that's advertised as stevia that says you can measure it 1-for-1, like sugar, that is not pure stevia. They've added fillers and cellulose and things to bulk it up so that you can measure it. So true stevia powder, which I actually have, is like 1/68th of a teaspoon is like a serving or something, right? Like it's a tiny, tiny amount. I just do a little pinch on the tip of my knife. And that, I use it for baking. So for like a whole recipe, you would use 1/4 teaspoon, right? So, but again, a lot of people find it that it's metallic or bitter. So one thing that I've done is I've started combining stevia with other low glycemic natural sweeteners so that you're not using as much stevia and it's offset by the other sweetener in terms of taste, but the overall glycemic index or glycemic load is still low.
Still low. And then that also too, I would assume as far as baking is concerned, it makes up for the bulk that is missing. Because that's a thing. Okay, so again, I don't bake, but I do know this. Because stevia is so sweet, and right, you're using this like 1/68th of a teaspoon compared to the full amount, like 1 cup, you're missing bulk that are like a baking recipe actually needs. So that's one reason why you can't just try and sort it out with stevia. So this is one of the keys that Ricki has figured out.
And also, it's not just the bulk, it has a chemical reaction in there, right? Sugar reacts chemically with everything else. So your cake or whatever doesn't want to hold together the same way. So then there's this whole category of sweeteners which don't sound natural, but the research I've done, they have some really good results, and they are considered natural sweeteners, which are the sugar alcohols. So I don't know how you feel about those, but like erythritol, xylitol, those are the two that I have found in my research to be the best because they are low glycemic. They don't seem to have any kind of negative effect on blood sugar. And xylitol in particular contains some compounds that inhibit candida growth. So that's why I use xylitol. But xylitol is, and these are made by fermenting on natural sources. So often xylitol is made from corn. But if you have an allergy, obviously you're not going to want that, or just because so much corn is genetically modified. So I look for the birch source xylitol. It's fermented on birch wood, and it's much easier for people to digest. The only issue with the sugar alcohols is that we don't have enough of the enzymes to digest them fully, which is why they pass through without us absorbing all the calories. So they're lower calorie. But you could have some digestive distress with that, meaning gas, bloating. Some people get diarrhea because you're supposed to start slow and incrementally increase those. With xylitol, our body, we do have the enzyme, but in very small amounts, and our body will increase its production as you continue to use it. But if you're a sweets addict like I am, what you don't want to do is bake a brownie and eat half the thing in one sitting, right?
It's like don't dive into a xylitol brownie unprepared. I will also say this: if you have issues with FODMAP foods, they are high FODMAP foods. The sugar alcohols, that's usually why. But some people too, if you find that you can't do like a whole lot of prebiotics, that may be another red flag that the sugar alcohols might not work for you. But I'm not opposed to them personally. In the US, you can get them from Swerve is probably the most popular version of or commercially produced erythritol sugar. And it's used heavily, like a lot of my keto friends use Swerve in many of their baking recipes. And then New Naturals also sells a bunch of different granulated sugar version of erythritol. It may have a xylitol one, I'm not sure. But those are the two that I know of where you can get them from.
And a big one is Lakanto as well.
Lakanto, okay.
Yeah, because they have a brown sugar variation as well. Yeah.
There we go. Oh, so you could use that if you're looking for brown sugar for a recipe, you could actually use that.
And then this is a fairly new category, but it's also, I imagine, because it's prebiotic, there are inulin-based sweeteners that are fiber-based, and you can get a sweetener. Someone just sent me this information on the sweetener from sweet potato fiber, and that's also considered a natural sweetener. So I haven't actually tried those, but the other one, which seems to be good for most people, is monk fruit, because it's actually a fruit. It's also known as Lohan Go, which is the Chinese name. And that's zero glycemic, not that sweet, but it's got a nice flavor. And so that's another alternative too. Or combining, right?
Can you bake with monk fruit sweetener?
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Sure you can.
So there's a lot of options here then. So are there any, like we were saying about like the bewares, the beware rules with stevia and baking? Because, look, I know I'm a clinical nutritionist. You work with people on their health. And so people become embarrassed when they know they're supposed to eat better, but they still like sugar. They like sweets. It's their birthday. It's the holidays, any number of things. And the reality of it is I have faced the fact a long time ago that sweetness, the literal flavor of sweetness is an important part of our palate. So to take it out entirely means that you're missing an integral part of life and of our body that we naturally seek out. So if we want to do that a little bit more healthfully, and especially as people are moving toward these various holidays and they can start to experiment with things like this, do you have any other rules around using erythritol or changing out the sweeteners? A, so it doesn't make them sick. B, they're not like, oh my gosh, this tastes like the worst thing ever and have to throw it out after it's done. Are there any tips or tricks around that?
Yeah. So the first one is the combining that I said. And with stevia, my mantra is always less is more. So you always want to start with a little bit less than you think you need. So if you think you're going to want 5, because it's so intense, right? If you think you're going to want 5 drops worth of sweetness, start with 3, taste it, and then see, because it should always be a tiny bit less sweet than you're used to with stevia, I find, to avoid that kind of aftertaste or whatever people consider a bitter taste or whatever. But I always combine. And then the third sort of golden rule, or I'm going to call it tan or brown rule, is when you're working with cocoa or chocolate, you do not want stevia to be your only sweetener because they just tend to bring out the bitterness in each other. So I always use something else, whether it's a Canto or, xylitol or monk fruit, along with the stevia when I'm working with chocolate. And I mean, you could use 100% of the xylitol or whatever, but the fact is these sweeteners are really expensive, and this way I'm kind of lowering the glycemic index a little bit more by using part stevia, and I'm also counteracting the potential overuse of stevia in terms of the flavor. So I find when you combine, and it's what you said too in terms of the chemistry. I mean, I've got, for people who are interested in playing around with new recipes, I think there's over 800 now on my blog. So those are all free. And, this is what I do. As an example, my Sweet Life Club, we develop holiday menus where people can play with these kinds of things and try them out. So there are definitely recipes for you out there if you want to try any of the things you're used to. You can find recipes for all of the standard treats that use these low glycemic sweeteners and are good. You just have to play a little.
And you guys, Ricki is super generous. So she's got this top 10 quick and easy anti-candida recipe ebook that I'm hoping that might have a couple recipes or so in there, maybe that they can start playing with.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of dessert recipes in there. And I think there's a latte recipe in there, like a golden latte recipe in there. If people are familiar with that.
I love those.
I know they're yummy. So it's a way to introduce you to a little bit of the sweetener in the beginning. But there's a grain-free pumpkin pie recipe for the holidays that is also egg-free, dairy-free, obviously gluten-free, and sugar-free on my blog. So anybody can go and check that one out if they want to.
Oh my gosh. We'll have to link that in the show notes, Ricki. Like we need to do that. I'm getting hungry right now.
That's when we're doing the interview too.
I know. And the other thing, just so you guys know, I do use the liquid stevia probably more frequently than I have bags of powdered stuff that I probably never use. And I use the liquid stevia a little more often. So it's very infrequent that I would want to make soda, to be honest with you, because I don't really like regular soda. It's too sweet. And I'm very happy normally with like seltzer water or club soda, that kind of thing. But you can add like 4 or 5 drops of a liquid stevia formula. They have different flavors. So they might have one that's like chocolate raspberry, another that's ginger, another that's French vanilla or something. And they taste like cream soda or something that you're familiar with. That way, if you got to get off of you got to break your diet soda kick, or you've got to get off of the regular soda, this can be a really easy way as well as just kind of get that fix, the taste, the bubbliness, but also without go into stuff that's not super great, or you just spending money on a lot of products that you don't know. The stevia, liquid stevia seltzer water trick is really easy and very inexpensive, and those bottles last forever.
Yeah, they do. And I'm just going to add this. This is what I've been drinking. So it's very similar to what you're saying. I'll brew up some herbal tea, some fruity herbal tea. So this is mango passion fruit flavor. And then I'll just ice it and add stevia. But sometimes if I want that bubble, I'll just pour some club soda in, about half and half. And it gives it that bubbly feel, but the taste of the iced tea. So it's almost like a Kool-Aid that's sweetened with stevia. You can do whatever flavors you want. Sometimes I mix different flavors and it's really delicious.
That's awesome. Well, Ricki, I just want to thank you so much for giving everybody so many ideas. And again, guys, you have to go over to rickiheller.com. She's got so many recipes. Like if you're looking for this and you're looking for clean stuff, you're looking for things that obviously are gluten-free and dairy-free. I think most of your recipes are also vegan, correct?
They're all vegan.
Yeah, they're all vegan. Yeah. So if you've got issues with eggs, which can happen a lot, if you've got eczema issues, not everybody, but some people have egg issues with eczema, this is a great resource for you. And hopefully this will help give you that stepping stone and that courage to go to the store and try something. And if you're like, oh my gosh, I don't know if I want to buy all this stuff right now, think about once a week. Saying, okay, I'm going to try one product a week. And then before you know it, over the course of a couple months, you'll build out this little alternative, healthier sweetener arsenal that you can start to play with. That way too, if you're on a budget, it makes it just that much more affordable. And Amazon's a great spot to also look these things up if they're not available in your local grocery store. Ricki, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh, my pleasure. Thank you.
I hope that you found today's interview to be enlightening. I love having Ricki on the show. You'll remember that we talked through her story in episode number 6 of the Healthy Skin Show. I'll link to that episode and everything that we discussed in the show notes, which can be found at skinterrupt.com/082. If you've got any questions, feel free to leave your questions and comments there so we can keep the conversation going. I deeply appreciate you tuning into this episode, and I hope that you found it helpful, especially because I know that Halloween is coming up, the holidays are ahead of us, and now is a really great time to start thinking about how you can shift around what you use in your life to get a little sweetness in your diet. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe to the podcast. I deeply appreciate your active listenership and participation in making this show what it is. Of course, make sure to share this with someone you know who could be searching for answers on how to reduce their sugar intake sensibly so that they don't experience as many flares. Thank you so much for joining me, and I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.